A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers joining us from all over the world. A very warm welcome to you. I'm Riya Kumar, your host for this virtual gala celebration. It's now time to celebrate the experience makers, individuals, teams, and entire organizations who have gone to deliver epic experiences for all of us. Your work matters, and we at the DOIs celebrate your efforts to stand up and to stand out. Everybody, we bring to you the DevOps India Summit, recognizing the excellence in the fascinating world of DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, and use of AI, ML Ops, blockchain, and value stream management. Let's now cheer for our jury members as I welcome them onto our stage. Mr. Sanjeev Sharma, SVP, Head of Automation and Platform Engineering at Truist, Mr. Mark Hornbeek, CEO and Principal Consultant, Engineering DevOps Consulting, Ms. Archana Joshi, Global Head, IT Strategy at L&T Infotech, Dr. Tapopal, Vice President Architecture at Fidelity Investments, and Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Head Innovation, Digital and Architecture at DCB Bank. The DOIS Awards has been sponsored by Deep Factor. Our DevOps stalwart is the founder and CEO of Deep Factor, a Silicon Valley-based developer security company. With a master's from Stanford University and a BTech from the very esteemed IIT Madras, he is a passionate Silicon Valley entrepreneur and has years of deep domain expertise in app security, DevOps, and cloud computing. Joining us now, let's have the loudest round of applause for the one and only Mr. Kiran Kamity.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to DevOps India Summit's award presentation for 2022. My name is Kiran Kamity. I'm the founder and CEO of Deep Factor. We are a Silicon Valley-based developer security company. And I'm super excited to be the sponsor for the awards presentation for this year. Before I get into the awards, I know everybody's been waiting for that. Niladri and the DevOps India Summit team has given us an opportunity to present developer security and the importance of why developers need to be secure software. First, we'll talk about that for about 15 minutes, and then we'll jump into the award presentation. Developer security has been an extremely hot topic lately. There's a common myth that developers don't care about security. And I'm here to bust that myth today because developers do care about security. It's the engineering leadership and the security leadership, their job to make sure that developers and QA teams actually care about security by giving them the right tooling, right processes, and the right structure for them to be successful. No developer wants to see 500 alerts that they need to be fixing from a security perspective. But if you show them what's important, if you give them the right process, if you give them the right tooling, and give them the most important things to be fixing, then developers will create magic. Let's talk about that a little. What is developer security? It is the ability to integrate security as well as compliance in many cases seamlessly into your engineering processes so that as you create your software, developing, testing it, etc., you actually not only think about the functionality of the software, but also the security of that software right from the get-go, therefore making security a habit. It has a few components. One is creating that security culture within the organization so that engineers are not just measured by what is being shipped from a functionality perspective, but also whether the software that they're creating is secure or not. Shipping secure applications is an extremely important part. And in fact, it's probably one of the key metrics that will determine whether your developer security program has been successful or not. Is your engineering team shipping secure and compliant applications from the get-go? And an extremely important aspect of developer security that will make that happen is for you to contextually educate your developer with the right tools and the right processes so that when they do something that could be of risk, you inform them that their check-ins, either the code that they wrote or the dependencies they brought in or something they put into their container image is insecure or could expose them to a potential risk in the future. All of these three aspects of creating a security culture, equipping your developers with the right tools, and providing the right education together makes a comprehensive developer security platform. Now, why is this important? Why do customers and why do engineering organizations embrace cutting edge developer security platforms like Deepfactor today? Number one is you prevent breaches by identifying as many security risks as possible early on in your development. Now, why is that important? Otherwise, you stand a high risk of your software getting hacked or breached into once the software gets into production. And we all know nobody wants that consequence. Number two is rapidly achieving your shift left objectives. Shift left basically means the ability to identify these risks for security or possibly compliance early on as you're developing the software, as opposed to late in the cycle. Now, why is shift left important? Because it will help you release your software faster and prevent security from being the bottleneck for risks identified later on in the release cycle. So the earlier you find them, the more time you have to fix them so that when you release your software, you're not, either having to decide whether you need to delay your releases because you found some log4j or something critical in your environment late in the game, or you're not in an unfortunate situation of having to ship your software knowing that there is a critical security issue because you're pressured for some time. Interestingly enough, we also find that customers get to accelerate and as well as maintain their SOC 2 and other compliance frameworks if they embrace the right developer security culture and tooling early on. For example, identifying the compliance risks, not just the security risks that exist in their applications during their development, is an extremely important item for developers that can save them time later on, because you don't want to be close to getting your compliance ready and then your compliance auditor tell you, did you check for all the vulnerabilities in your application? And you don't want to say no to that. So identifying these risks early on, how they not just affect the security of your application, but also how they map to your potential compliance risks like SOC 2 or PCI DSS or other compliance frameworks is very important as well. And it gives your dev team plenty of time to fix these things if you identify them soon. Now, before we jump into the processes and how I plug in what tool into my DevOps pipeline to make this happen, we actually need to take a step back and understand, in most modern cloud native applications, which is the majority of new applications these days, where are security risks? Where do these security risks lie? And what kind of compliance things do I need to worry about? At Deepfactor, we call it the 4-layer cake. In every containerized application, there are typically 4 aspects of security risks that one needs to worry about, and then 2 aspects of compliance risks that one needs to stay on top of. Here's an example of a simple microservices application. It has 3 containers: front end, my service, and a database. In every container, there are 4 layers of security risks. The risks that exist in your application code itself. These could be, did my developer leave my Postgres password in clear text? Or did my developer write a piece of code that is making an outbound connection to Russia or Madagascar, and I did not even know that? Or did my developer bring in a dependency, and that dependency is exhibiting certain bad behaviors such as malicious network activity or malicious file system activity? Is it touching etc password or other parts of the file system that I don't want it to? Identifying these types of things early on is a great way for you to stay on top of the risks that exist in your applications, whether these risks come from your application code, which is the code that your devs write, or the dependencies that they bring. The second part is typically your supply chain. Did I bring in some dependency, or did I put something in my container image that has known vulnerabilities? These would be, in my jar file, did I bring in log4j or Spring4Shell or other vulnerabilities that have known CVEs, critical CVEs associated with it? Identifying these vulnerable dependencies, identifying these vulnerable OS packages is very important. What's also important is if your developer brings in a piece of code or a piece of third party, and then you identify, hey, that piece of third party actually is susceptible to GPL. So you may want to know that before you decide to ship your application with some GPL code in it. So identifying the license information of this software automatically is also very important. Sometimes developers get overwhelmed with the amount of vulnerable components and the CVEs that exist in their dependencies. So while it's important to identify them, it's equally important to prioritize which ones of these your developers need to fix. That is where the right tooling can make a lot of difference, because otherwise your devs are either going to get overwhelmed with the number of vulnerabilities that they need to fix, or they're just going to stop caring. Usage is a great way to prioritize which vulnerabilities are important to fix. So for example, it's not okay to just say you have 250 vulnerabilities in your 7 microservices that have CVEs in them. But you can say out of these 250 vulnerabilities, 50 of them are actually used by your application because we observed it. We observed that your application loaded these vulnerable libraries. Therefore, worry about fixing them first, and then you can come to to fixing the other vulnerabilities next if you have to prioritize. And I'm pretty sure every engineering team goes through prioritization exercise as they get closer to their releases all the time. The third aspect is the ability to identify risks in your web or API interfaces that your application is exposing. These would be your top 10 OWASP type issues, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, so on and so forth. From a compliance perspective, there's a couple of things that are becoming very important. Lately, bill of materials has been at the top of everyone's mind due to supply chain and related attacks and the new Joe Biden government directive about having to stay on top of your supply chain as well. Now, at DFactor, we believe that supply chain is not just your static supply chain. It's not just the list of dependencies you have or the list of things that you put in a container image, but it also is a superset of that. And what we believe is that dynamic bill of materials is a much more comprehensive way to identify your supply chain. So in addition to just saying, here's your list of dependencies or here's your list of packages in your containers, if you're able to say that, your application loaded these executables or processes, it made these outbound connections, and these were the ports that your application is listening on. Here's how it changed from last Monday's build to this Monday's build. That becomes extremely powerful because then you can get a complete picture of your supply chain, not just the static snapshot of the supply chain. So we believe that dynamic bill of materials is an extremely important part in identifying the full coverage of your application and the risk surface as well. And lastly, mapping all of these security risks into compliance findings. Instead of saying, hey, you have 250 vulnerabilities, if you're able to say you have 250 vulnerabilities across 3 microservices, and when these 3 microservices were loaded, they actually exercised only about 60 of them. So you need to worry about fixing these 60. And out of these 60, 20 of them might affect your SOC 2 type 2. So please make sure that you fix them before you go to your release. Now, that we believe is the complete picture of vulnerabilities, usage-based prioritization, and mapping to compliance frameworks. And that is, in a sense, what we solve at DFactor, and what we recommend that our customers solve, regardless of whether they use DFactor or any other tool for that matter. Prioritization, we talked about it briefly, is an extremely important thing to reduce alert fatigue. And this is an extremely important aspect of making sure that your developer security initiatives are successful. Instead of saying, for example, in this diagram, I have a total of 179 vulnerabilities and 35 of them are vulnerable. So you've got to go fix all 35 of them in this one microservice and multiply that with the number of microservices that you have. It can get pretty overwhelming pretty fast. But if you're able to actually observe your container or application as it is running and identify which ones are actually used, and based on a combination of usability as well as exploitability, if you're able to filter it down into a smaller number, you can see an order of magnitude difference in the amount of things that your developers actually need to go fix, or at least give them guidance around which ones are more important to fix first. So please make sure that whatever tooling you embrace a mechanism that not just identifies a bunch of security risks, but also helps you prioritize which ones are important based on usage, exploitability, and other metrics, so that your developers aren't flooded with alerts and the alert fatigue aspect that typically results in the lack of success for most DevSecOps programs goes away. Now, we've talked about the right tooling. We've talked about where the risks lie in cloud native applications. We've talked about the importance of reducing the numbers and prioritization. Now let's talk about the developer's experience itself, which is probably one of the most important aspects of making sure that this program is successful for you, right? if you look at the standard DevOps figure 8 diagram, identifying the risks that exist in your application during your code, during the writing the piece of code, and identifying the risks that exist in their static code is important. You can always use static scanner type tools for that, and that's very important. But that's not sufficient because your application these days is composed of a majority component of your application is third-party components, dependencies, what you put in your container image, what APIs you expose, and all of that. And you're not getting a handle of those risks by simply scanning your code. So you've got to go beyond that. You've got to do scan for all of the 4 layers that I talked about. So whether you use any other tool or whether you use DeepFactor, which is more of a unified tool for all of these findings, the best places to identify these risks are not just when you're writing code, but also turning them on during your dev environments, in your test environments. What we've noticed is that nightly regression tests are a great place for you to turn on these kind of findings because every night your application is going through some basic minimal regression tests. If you don't have nightly regression tests, don't worry about it. Turn it on in your QA environment where your QA teams are manually testing your applications, and you'll still be able to find plenty of interesting insights about your application. When these insights are found, it'd be awesome if these insights are communicated in a ChatOps platform like a Slack or Microsoft Teams, and your devs can get to review the findings with the help of a security expert who sets the guardrails, triage them, make sure that the appropriate JIRAs are assigned, and this process has to continue. And once you make it a habit, this is actually the hardest part is to insert this process first, but once you make it a habit, your engineering team actually gets in the habit of embracing it. And then you leave it on for some time. And then once your team is comfortable with it, you turn on the gates in such a way that if there is a P1, you hold the release, you don't ship it. So that once you get in the habit of that, of detection for a few months, only then turn on blocking, because that's when you will piss off your developers. You don't want to do that if you turn on blocking too fast. And while it's important to identify these risks during your test as well as dev environments, with the right tools, you can also leave them on in your pre-production, or you can leave them on all the way in your production environments, because there may be some code paths that you're traversing in your application that you will not hit in your automated test environment that might only show up in production. And therefore, it's important to have the option of turning that on there as well. Now, we talked about what is developer security, why that's so important. What are the aspects of developer security that one needs to care about in the case of modern applications, cloud native applications? Where the risks lie? How do you prioritize? How do you integrate that into your developer's experience? There are several ways and tools in the market that you can embrace to make that happen. DeepFactor is leading developer security platform that provides a unified view designed completely for the modern cloud native applications from the ground up with an extremely powerful approach that observes both your static containers and your running containers. DeepFactor's goal is to make sure that engineering teams can create secure and compliant cloud native applications by default and make it a habit in your organization. There are a few things that are really unique to DeepFactor. How it seamlessly drops into your cloud native applications. If you're using Kubernetes, it just drops in with a webhook. If you don't have Kubernetes, no problem. DeepFactor has other ways of insertion, simple command line tools, zero code changes to your applications. And DeepFactor observes deeply every thread, every process, every container in the pods that you ask it to watch. And it scans your containers. It looks deeply in your running processes. It observes more than 200 parameters in every thread of every process as your application is running in your dev, test, CI/CD, or even in your production environments. And provides you not just the risks, but also prioritizes it and tells you with rich evidence information where you need to look at in order for you to go solve the problem. Examples like stack traces or pinpointing certain usage of vulnerable Log4j, or they're all things that DeepFactor does that is very unique to the tool and really necessary in the industry. We also understand that unlike organizations that have dedicated security teams, the developer-focused teams or engineering teams don't have the luxury to put together 5 or 6 different tools for different areas of risk identification in your application. Therefore, at DeepFactor, we take a unified developer security view. You don't have to worry about stitching together different tools and then filtering out which one's actually more important. but DeepFactor, especially if you're creating a cloud native or Kubernetes applications, it looks at your application risks, your dependencies, your container images, and your web and API interfaces, maps them to compliance, prioritizes all of them, all of that in a single integrated experience. And you get a simple Slack message saying, hey, the code that you checked in last night, that has this vulnerability, and here's why. That also provides contextual education so that your developers can get educated every time they do something that could induce a potential risk. If you'd like to see a demo of the product, reach out to deepfactor.io. Our team is going to be more than happy to help you guys get a 60-minute risk assessment of your application. In fact, many of our customers are surprised, sometimes scared, with the number of interesting things that we find about their own applications that they did not even know. And then we prioritize which ones of them are more important for them to fix. So that's always a useful thing. So you've got nothing to lose. Spend 60 minutes of your time and get a ton of interesting insight about your application and identify, I'm pretty sure, at least 3 things about your application that you did not know. So that's all about developer security and about DeepFactor. Now let's jump to the award submission, something that you guys have all been waiting for. There have been more than 7,500 registrants this time. So lots of attendees in this DevOps India Summit, several companies doing very interesting things. In this award ceremony, I'm going to start with the in-house projects. So in the category in-house, the runners-up for the best DevSecOps project of the year is Enlight 360 from ESDS Software Solution Limited. Moving to the winner for the in-house category, best SRE project of the year is Magic from DBS Technology Services India Private Limited. The next category is SI. In the SI category, the runners-up for the best DevSecOps project of the year is Infosys Limited. The winner in the SI category for the best DevSecOps project of the year is CGI FSDC RBCM, CGI Information System and Management Consultants Private Limited. In the category startup, the winner for best AI Ops, ML Ops tool for DevSecOps and SREs is Catonic ML Ops platform from Catonic India Private Limited. In the category overall, the runners-up for most successful cultural transformation for DevSecOps and SRE is Tata Consultancy Services, TCS. And in the overall category, the winner, DevSecOps Leader of the Year, is Arun Narayanaswamy from Amadeus Labs. In the category Tools and Technologies, the runners-up for the best tool for DevSecOps is XLR8S, Accelerates, I guess, from Zebia IT Architects India Limited. In the category Tools and Technologies, the winner for the best tool for SRE is Raccoon from DBS Technology Services India Private Limited. In the category Community and Nonprofit Initiatives, the winner for the best community or nonprofit initiative is InfoSec Diversity. In the category Jury's Choice, the winner for Jury's Choice Special Mention Award is Project Juno from T-Systems ICT India Private Limited. Super congratulations for all the winners and all the participants and applicants. Really excited to be able to share this with you guys. And here's to an awesome DevOps India Summit 2022. Thank you.